He is the Red Zerg Lambo.
And up here in the top left-hand side of the map, we have the blue Protoss player, the last of his kind left in the tournament so far. It is Berlin International ShoWTimE. I forgot what big stood for a second. I'm like, Berlin something.
Berlin in Germany.
I'm just like, it's so much easier when I just associate big with his muscles. I'm just like, that's ShoWTimE. He's got big muscles. That's why he's on big.
Yeah, you should have just gone with that one then. You know, always play it safe. Whenever I think, can I pull this off? I go, no, Zombie Grub, you have learned your lesson. Don't even try.
StarCraft has really beat into us the proper lessons for life. Don't take chances, scout your base, always sacrifice economy to ensure you are not getting cheesed. Yeah.
Exactly. Every time I move out, I'm just like, well, you're probably okay at moving out. Suddenly just 30 zealots are on top of me. And I'm like, this is life. All right. Like, really? That is what StarCraft teaches us.
Yeah. But, you know, I'm on the other end of it where I'm the guy who's just like, well, screw it. I will become that guy that made 40 zealots and blindly attacked in. I'm like, you know, I'll go all in with it. StarCraft conditions you to do one or the other.
You are absolutely that guy who, you know, this is actually you. You go for Dark Templar and Shadow Stride, and for the first 10 minutes, the guy you're facing is like, this guy's so stupid, doesn't make any sense, this isn't gonna work.
And then when they're
the last 5 minutes,
yeah,
they start base trading and they die to you, and they're like, well, this is just the stupidest thing ever. That actually describes you.
I have to say, it's a very comforting style. I mean, it's terrible for the other person. Like, oh my God, I feel so bad for other people. But when you do lose to those kind of cheeses and stuff, like, or sorry, when you win with those kind of cheeses, it's a very comforting feeling just being like, yeah, I was dead, but I came back. And that's like just every game. It's pretty great.
It is pretty great, yes. Pro seems to get the most of those types of reactions, I feel.
But, you know, ShoWTimE is literally the opposite of all of that. He is kind of like the safer standard player. The only thing I'll say is that ShoWTimE, I mean, much like many other Protoss players these days, has really been enjoying those Adept openings and stuff. And I mentioned that because, well, we do have a Twilight Council on the way.
Ooh, so you're exactly right about that, especially on Lightshade. So Lightshade has become the map of the Adept opener. Otherwise, unless you get, I feel like, a strong start, you're going to be in a bit of trouble on this map, for reasons I'll get into later, because right now I owed, because Lambo already had enough Lings to take care of an Adept, and he kept on making more Lings. So that speed still has a little bit left to finish up. This is going to be a Ling all-in, a very effective strategy against the Resident Enclaves opener, because the gateways don't kick in fast enough. Once the gateways are done, once the research is done, then yes, the Adepts will do well against the Lings, but until then, the Lings can bust this, and he's pulling the drones as well. ShoWTimE is going to have such a difficult time defending this.
The drones being pulled, by the way, for those who are wondering, they're going to be able to mineral walk through that Stalker wall and potentially try and push it out of the way, but even just get a full surround over here. The Adept is going to start to make its way forward. Probes being pulled off the line because ShoWTimE knows if he defends this, he's going to be in a golden position. That Stalker getting lower and lower. He gets pushed out of the way by the drones of the drone drill, and we end up seeing that these Lings are now getting in on top of the probes.
Yeah, the drones kind of don't know what they want to do now. They're finally getting involved in the engagement. It was a little bit awkward for a second. The shield batteries have finished up. The overcharge is there. More Adepts are being warped in. And this actually is still not that great of a surround for the Lings, right? Like, the probes have done their job, and ShoWTimE might have just held. Lambo's actually going to give up on trying to break the army, and it's going to try and I guess go into the main base. But that means that the production is in effect. The Resident Enclaves is still on the way, and ShoWTimE gets more units and better units to defend against this.
We're seeing that more and more of these Lings are bleeding off, and even though, yes, there are drones in production now, you end up seeing that Lambo actually made a lot more Lings behind all this. There's already another pylon being made to support the first layer of wall-in that just got knocked down. Cybernetics core is maybe a little bit vulnerable, you would think, except ShoWTimE actually has enough Adepts already to split off between his main base and his natural, protects both sides, kills the final drone there. Resonating Glaze finishes up Zombie Grub. This is the scariest part about all of this, is that Lambo now doesn't just get to do free droning like he really wants to right now. He has to worry about all of the Adepts that just survived that attack and now have Resident Enclaves that can make their way across the map.
Honestly, it feels like this should just be a game over. Like,
Yeah.
Lambo, is going to play out this game, and maybe he's been in this situation before, and he's actually been able to get a win after this, and more power to him. But I feel like this is more of a scenario where, like, if it's a ladder game, you tried, you failed, you tapped out. But we'll see what can happen. I mean, that was, like, the Ling all-in against a Protoss on Lightshade does feel like it could be exactly what the Protoss is paranoid of. They don't know what's going to happen, but they're going to be really on top of it. But the drone drill on top of that's where it usually, like, really gets the Protoss players. But I do believe that ShoWTimE has had to deal with this before. I can't remember exactly what game it was, but even, like, he did lose to it back then. I think he learned a lot about actually having to defend against it. And of course, it really helps that it had a shield battery that was already on the way before the Lings and drones arrived. But now here's the arrival of the Adepts. Only Lings there to defend. It's going to be about 40, 50 Lings to defend against 14 Adepts. That's not going to be enough.
Oh, Lord. And with this warp in of Adepts also, yeah, that's going to seal the deal. ShoWTimE, the solid wall defense. Hold on versus Lambo's big all in there.
Excellent showing by ShoWTimE. Right? I mean, that's you take that game. If you're losing to this on ladder and you don't want to veto Lightshade or whatever, like, take this defense, learn it, and then work with it as well. I mean, the shield battery actually having the ability to finish was really quite important. It wasn't just like made as the Lings rushed in. But I still think that actually it was the probe pool and the control of the units that actually was really what pushed it over, right? And the shield battery was even kind of a cherry on top with the way that he was ending that engagement. It actually kind of looked like, oh, it's been okay. The Lings could never get their full surround, their full capability. And the drones, as I was mentioning during the battle, it was like, you did the thing. You got on the other side of the wall and you're trying to help, but then there was almost an identity crisis. They're like, do we hold position? Do we attack? Like, it was not as awkward for ShoWTimE as I think Lambo wanted.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned the positioning also of, like, the probes and everything for ShoWTimE, but he was also using that hold position micro. So the Lings are kind of sitting there derping around as well, being like, okay, we need to attack something. We need to attack the Adepts. The Adepts are the only priority target right now, but the Adepts are behind all the probes. So the Zerglings are also derping out. The drones, like you said, are kind of having that identity crisis about what they want to do. They majored in liberal arts or whatever, and they're like, okay, well, I guess we could try and find a job attacking or something, or maybe we should just continue to try and move other people around. Maybe we can be PR, and it's just nothing was really end up working there. So really, really solid defense from ShoWTimE. That's actually one of my favorite things about like watching ShoWTimE, by the way, is that I feel like sometimes you watch ShoWTimE do those defenses, and he's so good at them that you kind of like look at it and you're like, oh, that just wasn't a very good attack. I'm like, no, you don't understand how many people die to that. But here we have down to the bottom right-hand side of the map, the blue Protoss player sitting up 1-0. He is ShoWTimE.
You know what the drones could do with a liberal arts degree? Become a
What?
StarCraft 2 commentator.
Oh,
Just like I did. The top left. That's the red Zerg. He is Lambo.
does anyone else think that Zombie Grub is extremely, extremely rude and disruptive, saying that Lambo is already so washed up he should just become a StarCraft 2 commentator? I mean, really, I just feel like it's a sign that Zombie Grub just frankly doesn't respect Lambo as a human being.
I mean, I said the drones. I never said
I know. But isn't he the drones? Isn't a StarCraft player all of their units?
That's quite a conundrum. I don't feel like I identify with all my units,
You don't?
No.
Okay, that's fair. If I'm playing Brood War or something, I don't identify with, actually, no, I do identify with my Dragoons. I'm just like, look, I can't believe you're doing this terrible pathfinding, but honestly, I probably would have done the same.
Yeah, I was gonna say Dragoons actually sounds like the perfect addition to this metaphor, whatever we're doing right now, which is like they don't know what they want to do. So they just keep popping back and forth. Anyways, moving past that, we got a block on the natural again. So kind of like we had to rush to talk about the rush at hand last game, but you were starting to bring up that ShoWTimE is not at all like the DT rush player, the counter rush player. He really has done he has done great strides. That's the way to put it. Anyways,
He's made great strides.
Yes, made. There you go. I was like, this is not the right word. He's made great strides as far as becoming a more like well-rounded player. And even with, I feel like the current trend for him being this very fast pro block on the natural, that has already made him a bit of a different player. Like, he is doing this as almost reliably as Mana would. And I feel like for a while, Mana was the only one doing it all the time.
Yeah, I definitely love seeing that kind of like progression in the meta where you see like a few people starting to do something and then like more and more people are like, actually, that's a pretty good idea. Like, I actually like that. I'll try and go for that. And eventually it just becomes almost like a total more standard thing for everyone to go do. We are going to see a bit of a change up over here from that first game from ShoWTimE. He's going to go into the Stargate. And I feel like, you know, I think a lot of people know Scarlet and like how she has this weird duality with her play. I almost feel like to a much lesser degree, we see that these days with ShoWTimE, where it's like he either feels like he's going for the big adept attack, which oftentimes is like more of an all-in from him, or he's going like just straight up, I'm the macro Protoss player ShoWTimE, you know who I am, like I'm gonna try and get up to the mid-game, late-game sort of defense, I'm gonna have a solid position, I'm gonna do little pokes and prods, like, and I feel like we're getting the latter of those two.
Yeah, a little bit. You know, he's actually, even like the PVT he played, I feel like he was doing like more of the macro standard ShoWTimE thing, but then the way he was deciding engagements was surprising. You know, it's like his builds aren't all in or risky, but he's actually taking more risks when it comes to engagements, because that was the only critique I really had of it. I mean, generally, of course, getting better at StarCraft's always great, but if there was like a actual pointed weakness, it was that lack of killer instinct, you know, getting the win when he could, which he's really improved on even in this matchup. So we do have to talk again about adepts though, because I'm waiting on a Twilight Council timing. Romanticide has been kind of popular for Stargate into Twilight Council opener, and I'm like looking and waiting, but I don't think this is actually going to happen here. Looks like ShoWTimE is just going to go for a Void Ray for a bit of a change up, first of all, some harassment, but then also that Oracle, which we'd expect.
Yeah, and it's going to be a second Stargate, actually. Yeah, I was with you, though. He was building up some of those resources as he was microing around his Oracle. Voider is going to be able to get 2 drone kills and then back on out of there. And, okay, there's the third Stargate. So we're going full on, not just regular Stargate memes. We're going into the Void Ray Stargate memes on Big Up. Oh my God, wait, that is the sickest positioning for Stasis Trap. I didn't realize you could do that and actually catch drones on the low ground. That's so cool.
Would have been cooler if it was effective.
Yeah, but you know, it's the idea. You know what, Zombie Grub? I'm not the teacher that grades based on like if you get the math problem the correct answer. I grade it based on you show your work, and I'm like, you know what? Partial credit. Oh,
I was gonna say I was afraid you're gonna go a different direction. We were like, the math doesn't have to be correct as long as they tried. And I'm like, well, we're trying again.
You attempted math. There are worlds where this could theoretically have been correct. Yes.
Oh God. I like this change up from ShoWTimE, not just because it's like very different what we'd expect from a guy like ShoWTimE, but it's also, I think, really flipping the, what I just talked about, how popular the Adept attack is on this map, kind of puts the Zerg player, if they're macroing, which Lambo is, they're like, oh, I have to be a little bit scared of that. I'm going to get a Roach Warren and see if I have to use it. And then, you know, it could be a long time before they realize I don't have to use it. In this case, Lambo would have gotten the Roach Warren, but I think very fortunately for him, he has identified he doesn't have to use it, and he's not going to use it at all on anything starting up Roach speed, and going right into the Hydras instead. Because if he had made like 7 defensive what-if Roaches, that's already, you know, that already feels really good for ShoWTimE. As I don't think these borders have actually been scouted yet. That is actually still going ShoWTimE's way.
Yeah, so Zombie Girl, there is one weird thing that I feel like happens with this style sometimes, as for like the Protoss player, which is they go for like this big massive Void Rays, but their transition isn't super fast. And I mean, like, when I say transition, I don't just mean like adding on a bunch of gateways and stuff. I mean, like, usually we end up seeing, you know, a lot of like a Robo Bay or like a Temple Archives or something to deal with a mass swell of Hydras. He's going to be able to absolutely get a kill / cancel on this 4th base, no doubt about it. And these Voiders are still very threatening right now. But I do wonder if you don't get a lot of more damage done with this, like, and your transition isn't fast enough, can you still make this work against an insane swell of Hydras?
That's the trick. If they are setting up for like a cut drone situation, speed up to Hydra, you could be in trouble. You know, like if this is the 55 or whatever it was drone all-in of the past that some people are kind of, you know, occasionally bringing back on Romanticide, they're really pushing the creep spread forward. then this would be probably very problematic. But it's not. We're already up into this almost 70s for the drones. Like Lambo is thinking very macro-oriented. And while he maybe still could have just pushed Hydras to hit this +1 in Hydra speed and the other production tabs not there, yeah, I think ShoWTimE has actually towed that line you're talking about. He would have had charge done in the nick of time, and he would have had all of his gateways. He went to 10 gateways to support his transfer back into the ground army. So Lambo, I think he's much better off not doing the attack. He wasn't really setting up for it anyways, not just like with his build, but also his creep spread. Yeah, this is a laser. All right, that's when I'm worried for ShoWTimE. Because the laser's taking the forward base and is pushing the creep spread.
Yeah, like you said, it looks like he's going to be able to survive that. And with Hive coming on up and also Lurker Den now finishing up, it does seem like Lambo's going to have the transition points to help deal with a lot of this army. But like you also mentioned, ShoWTimE has been able to make his way past like that earlier stage with a lot of charge lots, and now Storm's going to be finishing up. Is that like a key moment where ShoWTimE feels like he can put some pressure on or anything, or is it just kind of a more defensive play from both players from here?
I think it's going to be defensive. It's really hard to move out with Charge Lot Storm because all of his gas went into Storm Archons and Void Rays. It's different if you have like 6 Sentries or, I guess more Archons and 6 Sentries, I suppose is really the thing I'm talking about is force fields. Because otherwise they just kite you, back and back and back, buy more time for Lurkers. So it's not yet a very good pushing force. It can roam, it can take engagements, but it's always going to be set up defensively, drawing the units into the storms as opposed to trying to get the storms into the army, especially as the Lurkers finish up their range upgrade.
Oh yeah, dealing with those Lurkers with a range upgrade is oftentimes not fun, but this is one really nice way you can actually try and pull the Zerg player apart using those War Prisms with a ton of charge lots inside the main base, just 4 for right now, but he uses that as an opportunity to say, well, I'm going to pull some of the army away, and I'm going to poke forward with my main army, finds a couple of these Lurkers, honestly, just kind of off on their own. A few Queens start to come in forward to help defend, but the Voiders with the overcharge are going to be able to take care of the Spore Caller and the Lurkers very quickly, then backs off. That is the single only Roach, I think that's actually by that army, so not a lot of ground defense over there for Lambo for now, but he's going to end up getting ShoWTimE to back off.
I really liked that maneuver. That was exactly what he should have done. I don't think he anticipated taking an actual fight as the army, came back. But if he was going to find an opening and kill a couple of Lurkers, that his army was pretty good at. And it almost opened up an opportunity for the left side. Not quite, though. Lambo does clean up the harassment and can now focus entirely on the push. The creep spread has gotten very close, but stack defense, Storms, +2 about to finish. ShoWTimE does have supply and resources caught up in 3 carriers that aren't going to help quite yet, so I don't know about ShoWTimE actually pushing into this. He thinks he has an opportunity, but the charge out's even getting a bit choked up on that right side, demolished by a lot of the Lurkers. I guess they were away from most of them, but that just means the Lurker's still alive to push on the left.
Yeah, the Lurkers starting to make some progress over here. The Shield Battery Overcharge is going to keep these Void Rays alive for a little bit, but that is a ton of Hydra DPS to try and deal with the Storms. Hitting a handful of these Hydras, but not enough to actually protect his base, and now we end up seeing probes starting to fall over here. ShoWTimE having to abandon this base as he pulls his probes away and realizes, well, there's no way those probes are getting out of here alive.
They get a recall, but no, apparently not. They are going to all die, and that is a pretty fatal blow. I do think you stay in a game like this because you do have carriers and enough resources to continue building them if they were to like retreat now. But there's no reason Lambo were to retreat, right? He's going to push in for the actual victory. ShoWTimE, he's going to try and make a stand happen. He does have +1 on his carriers, which is pretty crucial against this composition. He blasts through the Lurkers, and now his Archon's still alive on top of the Hydras. He will push this back for now.
Yeah, for now is going to be the operative word here, because even with all the Hydras retreating, ShoWTimE is back down to 3 bases, and Lambo, even after losing all of those units, he makes a massive round of drones going up to 98, and is still making more units, and still has a bit of a mineral bank and everything to expand a bit more and everything. He just remade his entire army. I'm not sure that ShoWTimE has what it takes to defend a round 2 of that kind of force.
If Vipers get included, if a Corruptor swap happens, because he's like, well, maybe I can just like abuse my carrier micro. Like, both those options are pretty deadly to a ShoWTimE. You have to have it play very perfectly, like excellent feedbacks and always over static defense, which is certainly what he's thinking of right now. He knows he's in a desperate position, but he has managed to kind of get to that late game that provides some hope. and he has rebuilt his storms as well. And all those Archons live. You know, that's actually a decent amount of Archons. They get up into the Hydra's face. The Hydras don't do so hot.
Yeah, I mean, if you add a couple of shield batteries over here, and maybe I actually can absolutely see ShoWTimE making some magic happen. And this is absolutely some nice damage. He's going to be able to snipe off this Lurker Den most likely with these 4 Zealots, just focus firing it down. Can slow down a bit of that production. There's still 7 Lurkers out on the map, but Lambo just pulled his entire army all the way back. So now ShoWTimE is also moving forward. Going to be able to snipe off a building hatchery without really any kind of a fight over here as the Lurkers burrow pretty far away. ShoWTimE doesn't have to engage in that. He just backs off.
Little scary. That's a lot of room to try and pull back from, but it looks like it is going to be good enough. ShoWTimE even feeling now confident. The supply looking quite good. Is going to push through and is going to kind of find an awkward situation for Lambo. Lambo's half of the army on the left side, half of it going into ShoWTimE's third. That half, I don't know if it can kill things fast enough. I think the recall happened, and then now he might lose all the Hydras.
Yeah, the Hydras are going to be on the retreat. They do have a lot of creep spread to actually retreat back a little bit faster with, so that's going to be to their benefit, and they should be able to outrun a majority of ShoWTimE's army. The charge lots do get cleaned up pretty quickly. No drone damage happening, just some static defense going down. But the Warp Prism manages to survive, go up to the top. I like this, moving up to the top right-hand corner with a Warp Prism, but keeping his army on the bottom left so that if he wants to, he can move in with the main army in the bottom, but attack with harassment on the top side. So kind of hitting on 2 different angles at the same time.
You always want to be able to do that in StarCraft, but especially if your opponent's doing it to you. You know, like if they get to focus entirely on their push as well as not be bothered back at home and they macro perfectly, of course they're going to be in trouble. But even a couple of Zealots forcing a distraction can be the difference of like a feedback needing a Viper or not, for instance. If that's not an army fight you want to take, and the whole problem with the Archons are outranged by those Hydras, so if they can micro, they will. So you gotta wait for the Storms to help out. Lurker's looking a little bit lost. That is too many carriers for the Hydra squad that's trying to protect them. And we are going to be going more into that Supreme late game where we are looking more towards the Corruptor transition.
Yeah, I have to commend ShoWTimE. I really did not think he was going to be able to make it to this stage, but oh man, as I say that, a little bit of caster curses, he ends up almost losing a carry over there. And Lambo actually going to get trapped over here from both sides. Storm coming in from the top right, carrier coming in from the right, and over here on the left-hand side, the entire rest of the army charges forward. That's a lot of dead Hydras, and yes, Lambo has a bit of a bank. He can afford to lose a bit of that. Against this kind of army, though, you really don't want to be taking too bad of a trade here and there.
It gets scary, right? Like, you're like, yeah, I'm comfy, and then suddenly you take one really bad fight, and you're like, I'm a little less comfy. I'm getting uncomfortable. I don't like it. Actually, ShoWTimE moving into this engagement. I didn't expect it. He was going through a choke, but he is actually pushed on through. Void Ray is still trying to help out. The Lurkers are starting to whittle through these Archons, but they themselves also being cleaned up. Plenty of Storms left over. A couple of feedbacks. Can the carrier Void Ray army do it? This is a really scary moment, too, for ShoWTimE. He knows that Lambo probably has a Remax. The question is, does he take a good enough fight that the Remax doesn't kill him?
I think it's so critical right now, Zombie Grub, that all of the Hydras dying right there means that the Corruptors just could not engage. In a sense, there were 12 to 13 Corruptors that were just in Lambo's supply. They couldn't do anything because they weren't quite there with the army at the exact moment they were needed. And now the High Templars get to zone them out alongside those Vipers. ShoWTimE has already done a lot of damage over here. Oh, the High Templars did not get retreated backward. He throws down some last-second storms, but that is actually what was supposed to keep these Corruptors from just diving in on these carriers like this.
That was just it being on a different hotkey and him not moving it, man. Maybe he can still hold a stack defense, but this is such a difference. Like, imagine if there were storms here. Oh my God, did ShoWTimE just throw? I think he did. I think he did.
That is
God, that is brutal.
Yeah, that was like 6, 7, 8 storms that could have made a world of difference, but it's tough, and Lambo's gonna be able to jump on that and seize control of the game, tying up the series 1-1. Really, really well done there by Lambo, you know, not letting anything slip by him. But guys, we're gonna head to a short break before we move into game number 3. You guys are watching the DreamHack SC2 Masters. After nearly coming back from a very difficult situation, ShoWTimE barely makes a really small mistake and gets heavily punished for it by Lambo. Really nice job by Lambo in that last game. Be able to tie up the series, and we get ready to move into game number 3 now as we head on to Pillars of Gold of this PVZ.
I think your camera's a bit borked.
Or maybe I'm just really good at ventriloquism.
Either one. I prefer the latter, though. Now I'm really impressed. Well, we are going to get into the game. You don't need Fear Dragon's camera to work. Oh, it worked at the very last second.
Yeah.
To get into Pillars of Gold. So bottom left. I can't summarize that last game in one intro. So I'm just going to say it is the Blue Protoss ShoWTimE.
And up here in the top right-hand side of the map, the red Zerg player. He is Lambo.
So now to try and summarize that last game, ShoWTimE plays they both played a pretty good game. And then ShoWTimE takes damage, and we're like, oh, that might be it. ShoWTimE brings it back, maybe even strikes back hard to like a winning position, maybe. And he loses like 8 High Templar. To pretty much nothing, just 2 storms, and then they were all dead. So, I mean, it kind of came to, I guess, what we expected. The destination was what we called, but the journey was a roller coaster.
That is a good way of putting it, Zombie Grub. I am a fan. But, you know, I did go to show that ShoWTimE, despite obviously the one little misstep where I think you were saying someone during the break in the chat was saying, like, this justifies all of my F2A movement, which would have potentially been able to grab those High Templars, not have them idle there for a bit. Regardless, like, of that small mistake, ShoWTimE looked really solid in that late game stage, which is the ShoWTimE we know and love, right? Is that he's not just the Protoss player that's like, here's my gimmick in the early mid game, and I don't want to play anyone in a late game situation. No, he looks super solid in that mid and late game stage. So if he can get back over there and not have fallen behind from like losing his 4th base and stuff, man, that's actually a really scary position for Lambo to now have to consider, like, oh no, I really have to make sure he doesn't get to that stage again.
Yeah, if he had lost that game with that carrier Void Ray push, Lambo that is, like if he had lost there, he's been taking over that game and he's like, well, now I'm down 0-2, and also that second game, you know, I probably should have won. So that doesn't stem with a lot of confidence. But I mean, first of all, Lambo's never really been that guy. I don't think like mentality's really been his problem. And then, well, obviously it didn't happen that way, so it's all hypotheticals. Like maybe he knows he got a little bit lucky finding those High Templar, sure, but I also don't think it was in that position yet where it was like, oh, ShoWTimE was going to win if that didn't happen. It was looking much better for him, but it was still a game to be played out with Lambo having, 35 Corruptors and 3 bases still mining. But now we move on to Pillars of Gold. We get to kind of forget that last game, and I do think that ShoWTimE is going to play very differently from that last game. He's going to maybe take the opportunity to show something similar to the same opener and kind of instill some doubt in Lambo's mind. But for him to do another triple Stargate, especially on a different map, any other map than Romanticide, or maybe like a Death Aura, I guess, I would be shocked.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And that's one of the fun things about StarCraft is that even if you end up having like similar situations or like players potentially be able to go into like similar builds and everything, the way that the maps shape out is absolutely going to affect the way that the strategies end up playing on out. But we do have, after the first Void Ray, the Twilight Council being added on much faster this game. So Zombie, you were talking last game about Stargate opening into a Depth. And maybe that's what we'll end up seeing this game. I mean, time will still tell. We do have the 3 gateways being added on, though.
Yeah, I think that is the plan here. So Lambo, he's not going to be able to get so much scouting done here. The lack of gases in the natural can be like a little bit concerning. A lot of builds with Stargate in the base, 3rd base, Twilight Council, whatever. Like, those are going to have, I feel like, 330, 4 minute. Kind of in that realm, gases, and clearly they weren't there even after 4 minutes. But is that enough to truly tell that it's like resonating glaives? Like, no, there's so many follow-ups to Stargate, and that even includes occasional real all-ins from them too. This is going to be pressure, and it needs to do some damage, but it's definitely not an all-in. So Lambo's still trying to figure this one out, just built a bunch of spore crawlers. Well, 2, working on a 3rd one. You know, I guess got to be paranoid, aware that it could be like an Archon follow-up, so DT's first, obviously. And that is going to hurt his defenses against Resume Glaives. Maybe not to a point where he just loses against it, of course, but it's not going to, they're not really going to help him.
Yeah.
And you know, there's no oracles, they're not even really necessary. It sucks.
Yeah, one of my favorite things also is that when a Protoss player identifies, like, oh, you have all these spore crawlers, you're really worried about this. And you know how you have the adepts that will shade around, and they get into a mineral line, and the mineral line's already evacuated, so then you shade out. But during that time, you're like, I'm going to focus down the spore crawler, because even though I'm not following up with adepts or oracles or anything, they're now going to be thinking that there's maybe a follow-up there. So they're going to rebuild these again. Like, I can make them make another spore crawler. That's one of my favorite things. But so far, I mean, he hasn't really needed that. He's been finding some pretty decent damage, already finding a clean over here, getting into a nice spot, but not quite getting into the drone lines just yet.
Yeah, this was it blindsided Lambo. You know, he was trying to protect himself against maybe an oracle popping up, which never did. And then, you know, the adepts don't care about the spore crawlers. Even a couple of extra adepts don't need a warp prison to get across the map when you got shades. This, I think, is just too much of a surprise. Lambo's gonna tap out. GG. ShoWTimE with a clever build. Lambo had to think of so many possibilities, and the one possibility he didn't think of was maybe adepts. And usually that comes down to getting like a ling on the production, right? You see 6 additional or 4 additional adepts warp in, you're like, oh, you can have enough lings to stop them from getting into the nook and cranny of that baneling nest and the hatchery. But he didn't get that. So he didn't have the scout on the build. There were so many choices to think of post Void Ray, and he didn't get to see the army composition until it was too late. Excellent build by ShoWTimE.
Yeah, and ShoWTimE also doing like some of the small things that always help out in those situations with the adept plays where you aren't just using like the one big force of adepts that are shading around and allowing the Zerg player to focus all of their attention in one location. I mean, StarCraft, like we said, RTS game, it's about splitting your opponent's attention, having the adepts on the left-hand side at that 3rd base. Yeah, there were like 15 or 14 drone kills at the end of that game. I would say about 9 to 10 of those drone kills were just the adepts at the 3rd. The adepts in the main base were still getting tons of damage done just by killing so many lings, but it just added even more complications there for Lambo, where maybe there is a world those 4 other adepts is joining with the main army, and it's like, you know, I'm not dead. I'm like not in a good spot, but I'm not dead yet. I haven't lost all my drones. No. ShoWTimE shuts it down by just splitting his attention as well. So well executed build there by ShoWTimE. I think he kind of already explained everything there is to know about that game, though. It's like Lambo didn't quite see it coming. ShoWTimE able to execute it really well. Yeah.
I wouldn't be even surprised if that was like a little bit faster. Maybe other people do usually get an Oracle. An Oracle is literally the cost of a Twilight Council. There you have like an extra how many seconds? No, it was like really expedited. It was very deceiving because of the previous game and the opener and the doubt that it could put into the Zerg's mind of like, what am I doing with the Void Ray? And in that particular game too, it also caught Lambo being a bit greedy. He did not get a Roach Warren just in case he was just on Ling in a very late baneling nest. So again, very good build here. This guy is now up 2-1, and he's the blue Protoss for BIG. It is ShoWTimE.
And down here on the bottom left-hand side of the map, we have the red Zerg player. He is Lambo. All right, well, we got the early probe scouts, as we have seen in pretty much all the other games so far. So ShoWTimE loving going for those hatchery blocks. Lambo immediately just takes that 3rd base, as he usually does, and we get to move into a more normal-looking game. But I mean, we talked a little bit about maps and how they've impacted build order choices and stuff. Do you have any feelings about this wonderful map, Jagananatha?
Jagabanana?
Jagabanana. I like that one, Jagabanana.
I don't think I'd even say it again if I tried. Yeah. Well, it still is chosen by Protoss players, yet seems to have a bad win record. Now, I've been saying this, but not actually keeping track, I guess, since it was first reported a couple weeks ago. So maybe it's changed. Maybe it's like I don't know, growing pains for Protoss. But I think me and Roddy kind of talked about it, where it was like, maybe it's more in the idea that like if you can get over a certain hump, then it's great for like, for instance, that late game style that ShoWTimE, I mean, kind of showed like that the Void Ray thing wasn't super like, Void Ray in a carrier, but it kind of went there, right? Maybe that's when it can be good. But then in any other way, it seems like it is good for Zerg. These longer maps, usually say are good for Zerg. As far as the rush distance, actually not that long, but in terms of like literally the width versus the height, this is a very height map, isn't it?
Yeah. For some reason, whenever I see like very height-oriented maps or like maps that are longer vertically rather horizontally, I always start to think back to like some of the really old school maps, because I do feel like we get quite a few wider maps oftentimes these days.
I mean, Romanicide is kind of our biggest, thickest map in a while, as far as left to right? But yeah, it's like this is actually such like the opposite map to Romanicide in so many ways. So you get a little bit more on the chokes, right? You have a little bit more of the terrain difference, literally in like the color palette, but also talk about like acceleration zones. That's very different. You gotta kind of play around that, and the way that you path through the middle of the map can actually be deceiving the first time you play this map. Obviously, they don't get deceived anymore, but sometimes the AI actually works against you, and then it is a skinnier map that's taller as opposed to wider. But for some reason, the Protoss players seem very comfortable in either one, and we still get to make fun of Submarine, is apparently what it is. Like, that's just still them have no one wants to choose.
Yeah, unfortunately for Submarine. Well, for now, guys, we do have a pretty normal looking opening. ShoWTimE does the mild poke forward with the first Adept, gets some scouting information, confirms a third base, has a Stargate added on behind all of it, and does get up the first Oracle. Not a fast Void Ray like he's been going for every other time he's gone for this this good old Stargate opening. So we'll see as Lambo makes like later Spore Crawlers. He still hasn't started up any Spores, so there's a chance that these Oracles dive in there a little bit faster than Lambo was expecting.
Exactly. I think that's what ShoWTimE's hoping for, is that Lambo doesn't even see this. So I think he was kind of looking around for maybe an Overlord initially with the Oracle, and then it was like, no Overlord, let's try and circumvent the Lings that he knows are going to be running around. Unfortunately for him, Lambo's Lings were actually properly positioned. They did see the Oracle, and that's going to give him just enough time to not just build the Spore Crawlers, but also get his Queens in position. But I think you're right. I think he was hoping that considering the last couple of openers haven't really been so dependent on Oracle harassment, that Lambo, and that last one especially, right, that Lambo would have tried skipping that step.
Yeah, a nice move over there from ShoWTimE as well. He actually tried to do something which like, no Protoss players ever tried to do, which understandable reason. He actually tried to go into the natural expansion first of the Oracle. Now the Overlord's all sawed, so the Queens are in position, because if your Queens are either at the main or the third, it's like the natural is the easiest one to get to, because it's just moving one base over. But I like little moves like that from players who are just trying to be a bit extra tricky, where you say, well, nobody ever goes to the natural. It's always the main of the third. So let me try and give it a shot here. And it doesn't work out, but nice little thing to keep him on his toes, and finds a couple more drones. That's 4 drone kills already.
Yeah, plus the denial in the fourth is quite obnoxious.
Yeah.
Gonna go and pick a drone out of a mineral line and bring it back over. He wants it again too. Gonna miss it though. And it's still 3 Oracles quite alive. If they had enough energy and Lambo really wasn't paying attention, they could actually tear down. Oh, well, now it's 1 Oracle. Okay, now it's 2 Oracles alive. I was going to say they can actually tear down buildings, but not anymore.
Yeah, even though an Oracle with full energy will kill every building except for a hive, it's not quite the same when you have like 25 energy left, so.
Yeah. And, Lambo should never let that happen. His queen should be close enough.
Takes a while. It takes a while.
Yeah. Really good double hallucination scout coming out from ShoWTimE. If he was just saying, oh, Oracle's okay, everything scout that I need, he would be in danger. As there's a Spire tucked into that natural the Oracles had yet to get to. Excellent scout there. Now, Lambo knows he's scouted. And here comes the old conundrum. What does Lambo choose to do? Now, he's also scouting ShoWTimE, hopefully, and seeing, like, can you push me before I get to anything at all? But if he doesn't see a push, for instance, like, does he actually go into a Spire, or does he just go into pure Roach?
That is definitely going to be the big question here. And, well, the nice thing for ShoWTimE is that it's not like he's lost his oracles. He's actually continuously diving in and out. So if he is really active with those oracles, he can actually get a bit of information about, like, okay, what do you make it? Okay, I see a lot of roaches over here if he manages to make his way over to that 4th base. And he should have a better idea of exactly what kind of follow-up there is from Lambo outside of maybe, you know, are you actually making the mutas? Because that's a little bit harder to actually determine. But, whoa. Interesting. ShoWTimE is going to go for this push out over here. His gateways are still finishing up, but he's got 8 gateways that are about to be finished here with charge and +1 weapon completing. This could be a really, really scary attack after the first warp in. But ShoWTimE, until you get that first warp in, this army is not that scary.
I actually really like how he's playing it because, yeah, you're right. It's not that scary. I don't even think it was that. I don't think it was a planned, really well-timed attack. Like, I'm not actually sure it was something where he was like, yeah, this is gonna win me the game, you know. Not so much. I mean, he went for 3 oracles. That's quite a lot of investment, you know, for the up front, which pushes off again, like, it's the same cost as a Twilight Council or a, you know, partial cost of the upgrade. But anyways, poking forward, seeing if he, you know, could do something. If suddenly Mute disappeared and nothing else, maybe he could find a 4th base to bop. Instead, he's like, you know what? I don't feel it. I'm not seeing anything. I think he's just building Ling Ravager. He absolutely was. Let's pick up a Warp Prism, try and harass, then go back home and defend. So, I mean, there was a little bit of a pause on him going into Storm, despite getting up to 6 gases kind of quickly, and that's a little bit concerning. That was, like, the time he was, like, actually moving out, and if that time he moved out means that he has 20-second later Storm, and that's what loses him the game, ow, that hurts. But I'm a little worried it might be.
I'm definitely worried with you right now, Zombie Grove. Those High Templars are basically just sitting dead weight right now, and those Storms could be so useful paired with the Force Fields against these Banelings, where the Baneling's going to come in from the left-hand side. Storm is just completed, and it's going to be done in the nick of time to start zoning out some of these Banelings. Takes care of quite a few of them. The Archons also managed to survive. A few Banelings still left over, going after the remaining High Templar. Are there just too many roaches now, though? Zealots getting warped in. They're going to try and help out, but Zombie Grub, the overwhelming numbers of Lambo are just starting to power on through.
Can't really do much about that, right? Lambo even did something really tricky by bringing 2 Banelings forward on the left side. That actually is still threatening, right? They want to get those big juicy Storms, but even 2 Banelings cladding into High Templar still means that they're dead. So ShoWTimE really, I mean, he had to panic. He had to do whatever he could to keep the Storms alive, but in the process, I mean, he still was getting overwhelmed, right? He was still getting tucked into his own corner without much room to maneuver, and this is definitely Lambo's game. ShoWTimE gonna have to tap out here. He's at half the supply of his opponent.
Yeah.
GG.
There it is, GG, and we're going to an ace match, a decider match of game number 5 to see who is gonna get to move on, who's gonna get eliminated from the DreamHack SC2 Masters European Edition. We're gonna be back after a short break before moving to that game 5. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're moving into game number 5. Only one of these players is going to be able to walk away from this match and go on to the next round of that lower bracket. The other player will have their run eliminated, and that's going to be a tough story to sell here for whichever one players that does get eliminated, because this is the last European edition of DreamHack SC2 Masters for the year. This is going to be one of those big finalizing moments for one of these players.
Yeah, I mean, it's very possibly the last time they get the a decent amount of points anyways, excluding those open cups. So that's also wearing on their minds. And here we are in game 5, lower bracket, bottom left. On Oxide, we got the blue Protoss, ShoWTimE.
And up here on the top right-hand side of the map, the red Zerg player currently 8th in the standings for the EPT points for Europe. It is Lambo.
There's two things. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I say he's 8th. I'm looking at Liquipedia for this, and I don't know necessarily if it's added in the points that he's already like guaranteed himself for this season. But according to Liquipedia, 8th place is just shy of the cutoff for qualifying right now.
Interesting. Well, things might still change, I guess. Still, at least there's a TBD in the Wikipedia page. That's all I'm saying. Well, I was gonna talk about the last game a little bit. Like, two things I wanted to bring up is that one, I didn't realize that I rechecked my notes here, super professional, and it's kind of funny. Romanicide and Jagannatha are like the exact opposite in terms of terrain and the way that their dimensions are, but they do actually share the same rush distance. So, as quickly as you would expect, you would get across the map on the second map of the day, right? And the same thing happened there. So Lambo's attack is actually still pretty speedy, goes through the acceleration zones as well. And then second of all, I still go back to that storm being like the 15, 20 seconds later than maybe it could have been. In that, if he had been able to get a storm on the right side and then push on the right side and then take on the left, right? Because Lambo was splitting and ShoWTimE knew the army was on the right side. If he actually able to push into that army on the right side, I feel like he has more flexibility. But what ended up happening was that he was waiting for storms, so he got pushed back into that point where both armies could collide in on him. Where, like, really, if you see a setup as a surround or a concave or anything like that, the ideal situation is to be like, well, your army's cut in half. Like, I'm going to attack one army and then the other one, if you can. But ShoWTimE really couldn't do it in that situation. So created a bit of a lame ending, right? We're just gonna get collapsed in on, couldn't do very much. Storms need to actually be forward at the last possible second. And we probably don't see a repeat of that timing. It's kind of funny how it feels like it all goes down to those oracles, not really getting a whole lot done. And then also having the delay on further tech because you went 3 oracles instead of just 2. And then imagine if he had gotten a Void Ray again, too. That's another funny thing. So many Void Ray openers. What if a Void Ray had been there to help out?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would have added in some DPS. Like, there were moments there, even at the end, where he was just getting kind of stomped over that it was like, well, he's actually warping to more Zealots. Like, imagine if there had just been like 7 or 6 less Ravagers because the Void Ray was consistently picking them off. Yeah, that's a good point. And you know what? ShoWTimE is going to actually go for the Void Ray opening this game with that Stargate since, he's pretty much always found at least a little bit of value with those Void Rays, so I don't hate it.
At least putting doubt into Lambo's mind, right? Like, the Void Ray is very successful at taking out the Overlords. A Phoenix could do the same thing, and before the Void Ray change, that's what we saw, was a Phoenix doing the exact same thing. But I think the Void Ray not only takes care of the Overlords, puts doubt as far as follow-up goes, there's that new follow-up that is the decent amount of Void Rays. So our mana side, we saw like triple Stargate, a lot of Void Rays, but I'm talking like 4 or 5 that go over on the map and try and kind of bop a couple of Queens and get a cheeky kill on a 4th base. So more options have been provided past the Void Ray, plus it takes away all vision from the Zerg.
Yeah, which, I mean, those two things pair together well, right? Because Lambo is the kind of player who will know about those kind of attacks and will say, well, I don't have vision, so I have to be ready that he could go for that, even if he doesn't. And we end up seeing it was an Oracle follow-up behind it. It's actually a Robo as well behind that, and no additional units being produced out of that Stargate. So even if ShoWTimE is not going for it, Lambo at least had to, in his mind, respect the potential for that. Seeing the Oracle, though, should at least seal, you know, a few of those doubts away.
So it's a bit more like last game, except, yeah, no triple Oracle opener. The Void Ray can be a little bit more useful when it comes to helping out with the defense. Again, putting a little more doubt into Lambo, and yeah, even supply blocking him, nicely done. And then the single Oracle follow-up provides that really consistent scouting that the Void Ray kind of starts to get scared of doing as the creep gets further and the queens get more aggressive. Lambo is going to unsupply block himself, move on to his own macro game with Evolution Chamber. ShoWTimE actually going for a fairly quick Warp Prism. You know, usually I would say you see like maybe an Immortal or two pumped out, and then you can time it out with Charge and +1 with the Warp Prism as well. But the Warp Prism first, I think, just means a little bit of Adept harassment in the main, just something to keep tabs on your opponent. Or can he actually fit an Archon drop into this?
I think he's
pretty fast.
Yeah, I think he's gonna go for the Archon drop, right? He's getting the Warp Prism early enough that he can send it across the map. But Templar Archon's build is really fast, actually, despite it being one of those high-tech buildings. So. Yeah, I think it'll be like finishing up right as the Warp Prism gets over to the top left.
Very cool then. So, I mean, kind of like an Archon follow-up, but, you know, obviously not off of 2 bases, not the build he chose, but off of 3. You know, it's not going to find any type of timing to really hurt with the double Archons, but it clears up creep, clears up queens, can get a couple of drones, can even tango with roaches, you know, as much as you would want. And then he could even add on a charge load attack if he thought his opponent was being really greedy. And in a way, Lambo kind of is. We got Swarm Hosts on the way. But 5 Swarm Hosts, not actually that much. Plus, this Warp Prism could always run away from it, right?
Yeah, and there's also something else I think is worth mentioning is that there's not a lot of vision right now for Lambo around the map. Because remember, with the Void Ray opening, you kill off a majority of those forward-facing Overlords. And yeah, there's like Overlord speed and stuff. You can still get an Overlord across the map pretty quickly. And there is a Zergling that's actually spotting just above ShoWTimE's main base. I think besides that one Zergling, like if there's gonna be a Nidus Swarm, which I feel like usually there's Nidus Swarms with these kind of builds. I don't know, like what's the plan? Is he just gonna continue to pump up Swarm Hosts?
Yeah, it's kind of a new trend. I think we see it most on Romanticide, but here we are on Oxide, where you just move across the map. You just use it for more of a forward attack, and then if it doesn't do extreme damage, yeah, then you add on the Nidus Swarm. But the idea of popping up a Nidus Swarm as a surprise and getting a very swift Nexus kill isn't really, doesn't feel like the goal of Zergs anymore. They're like, we just want to kill you. We want to force you to engage and then kill your army and then kill all of your bases. But this might be a bit more of a premature engagement that Lambo was hoping for. Forced to pop his Locusts as the non-Locust army is just really weak right now, which means that they won't be able to catch ShoWTimE back into a corner.
Yeah, I'm surprised the Locusts even make it this far over. They will be able to get a couple of shots off on maybe an Archon. Maybe they get snag a Zealot. No, not even that. Swarmos have still maybe another 10, 15 seconds before they come off of cooldown. So ShoWTimE's going to try and charge and pounce on this army just before that happens. A few of the reinforcing Swarmos do get the Locusts out, but look at the Archon count. They actually demolished any of those Locusts coming on out. ShoWTimE tries to go for some force field to lock in some of those Swarmos. Doesn't quite get it. He's forcing quite a bit of this army back, though.
Oh, no, he actually really needs an Immortal. Oh, no, that's actually a really crucial loss. Oh, that sucks. I don't even know where that came from. That wasn't even reinforcing. There are Immortals on the production tab. That is unfortunate. All right, so his supply still looking decent, and he still has, like, 2 Immortals, 3 actually about to come forward here. That's still decent. A lot of Archons protected by shield batteries will clean up those Locusts, as you saw, instantly, before I could finish my sentence. And the Roaches will fall, perhaps with the help of a couple of force fields.
And we end up seeing that Lambo has to back off. Now, the nice stutter step micro, especially on creep from those Roaches, are going to be able to snag quite a few of those Zealots. They manage to push back the Archons. But at the end of the day, like, Lambo is continuously getting pushed back over here, and ShoWTimE's army is just getting larger and larger. Even with the Immortal that kind of got sacrificed there, the Immortal count is growing. The Archon count, like you said, is growing. And now we got a Warp Prism that's able to move across the map and do this big Zealot warp-in. I mean, Lambo doesn't exactly have a whole lot to deal with that kind of stuff. All of his Roaches are at the front, and Swarmos are the worst thing in the world at responding defensively.
You know, I really think this was on purpose initially, but Lambo's roach speed only just recently finished. Like, again, in the beginning, maybe it was on purpose, a lot of creep spread, right? But that was a little bit awkward, and that was a decent fight there for ShoWTimE. Once again, going to push Lambo back. And every time he takes a good fight defensively, it means his army is actually just better. With the Locust gone, those pure roaches, they suck. They actually just do. Against the army that ShoWTimE has, he doesn't quite have +2, and he's missing that one immortal, which is quite unfortunate. But if the roaches are the only line of defense, and they're forced to defend their third hatchery, it could be very troublesome. And that is Lambo's current predicament. He has been on a very low supply of drones, still is, only 58, fourth hatch only halfway done. So he is really depending on taking very good trades.
There's actually 0 queens left for this tournament. There's 1 queen, I guess, that just got rallied on forward. So that Voider is able to pick off 1 or 2 of the Swirls. That Stasis Trap actually saving ShoWTimE from some potentially really, really bad damage there. Manages to lock down quite a bit of the army supply. He's going to have to leave his army now back over by that third base to actually clean that up. But he is zoning out the rest of the main army with his Archons. He's pushing on forward. Those sentries could also throw down some force fields if they get close enough, but I think that Lambo senses that he's trying to run away from this. Lands some decent corrosive biles over here, but he is just getting pushed further and further and further back. Even with the Locust Wave coming on out, ShoWTimE has so much space to retreat back from. And that Warp Prism is even maybe just going to look for another angle to attack in at.
His Archons are getting a little low on those shields, but the Locust actually just on the command got distracted by left side, so they couldn't quite help out with the main engagement. A lot of Archons still fell. They were getting kind of low, and they actually did finally fall. So maybe Lambo can hold a defense, but ShoWTimE, with a lot of Zealots, actually going to retreat with them. I was going to say perhaps bring the Warp Prism with the main army, but no, he's not going to go for the killing blow. Doesn't feel like it's the opportunity. He's got a 4th base. He's working on +3. He's got Blink on the way too, so that will make his army even better against the one we see once he builds a Stalker count. I guess, yeah, pulling back was the right call, and actually this is going to be a good fight. Force Field's coming down, taking down a lot of Ravagers, a handful of Roaches, and then he just escape away from the Locust.
Yeah, this is becoming a do-or-die moment here for Lambo, who has a 4th base, sure, but has been bouncing his drones around. It was only a 58 versus 81. He has to break ShoWTimE sooner rather than later, and ShoWTimE holds yet again. Lambo, don't let the supplies fool you. He is in a really, really tough spot right now, and is actually not even mining from this 4th base anymore.
Yeah, the supplies are so deceiving. They can be a little more accurate if, like, ShoWTimE's losing Nexus, right? But the economies actually have not really been touched. Lambo actually the one losing economy that wasn't that high to begin with. Void Ray still not going to fall, but this time Queens are here, going to be able to take that down if necessary, if given the opportunity, I guess. One last Locust Wave, still no +2 though, so that's a bit of an anti-timing. Lambo's going to move in. He's got a lot of Ravagers, getting a couple of connections, but not as many as he was hoping for, and that is so many Immortals still left over.
Yep, 8 Immortals now out on the map. I think the 8th Immortal is just rallying on forward, and a lot of Stalkers being made. ShoWTimE finally says, well, you know what? I actually don't need choke points anymore. I'm okay with that. And loses an Archon over here. I think that is the one thing that may be nice if he gets some Archons to deal with these Locust Waves, but I think he still is just doing a great job pushing this back. As ShoWTimE just remaxes on a much better army supply, and those supply counts start getting evened up, yeah, ShoWTimE is going to feel so confident about these fights.
Maybe a little too confident right now. I think he's paying attention to his blink forwards as opposed maybe to the fact that his immortal shields have all been popped and once again getting popped. I still think his army's good enough, especially with the shield batteries. Like Lambo, looking maybe a little bit desperate to push into this, but ShoWTimE also, every time he counters and blinks back, I'm always like, whoa, be careful. Like, but his Stalker count really has grown quite a bit. It's about to have +3 as well, and another aggressive blink forward, actually trapping the Ravagers this time, acting as their own force fields. That does cost a lot of his own Stalkers, but the Immortals also alive and healthy, might be able to take on the rest of the army. Looks like it is going to be a bit of a pullback time there. ShoWTimE, as I was saying, was like, oh, maybe overly aggressive. Look at the banks, look at the economic situation. ShoWTimE can kind of afford that.
Yeah, one of these players has the follow-up capabilities, and the other player does not, although all the Archons are now gone, so these Swarmless Locusts are going to be able to actually do some pretty sick damage for a little bit. One or two of the Immortals are going to get close to falling. They don't even end up dying over here, and the Oracle is actually adding inconsistent DPS now. It's got so much energy available as well. It's actually just one by one picking off these Ravagers. This is actually ridiculous, but ShoWTimE finally ahead in supply at the end of all of this is going to have to back off yet again because, you know, Locust, Swarmos waves, gonna force something, but at the same time, the top left, you actually see that hatchery is under attack from another big round of those Charclot Warpins. It's gonna be Lambo on 3 bases.
He's got another Locust wave, and now he's finally finding economic damage to his opponent. Maybe he can actually take some of the extreme wins here. He's going to push back the army. Locust, though, not really lasting as long as he was hoping for. Some of them got distracted on the left side by the buildings. He's going to clean up the probe line, but not actually kill the Nexus, and I don't think that was good enough.
Yeah, especially considering he's losing his own 3rd base. To the big charge-led run by. He might be able to keep a few of these units alive, or a few of those drones, but he just got forced out, and like you said, he didn't kill the Nexus. He killed a handful of probes. ShoWTimE is now at a reasonable probe count for how many bases he has, given that he's mined out of his main and natural at the 16-ish minute mark. And we're going to end up seeing aggressive blink forwards. He's finally sniping off a few of these Swarmos, which is what has given Lambo longevity here. Although probe transfer is happening at a very awkward time, but that is still not going to matter. ShoWTimE